A new study shines a light on how romantic relationships break up. It finds married women are twice as likely as married men to take the first step towards divorce.
What people keep getting married? You know what I mean? Isn't anybody looking at the stats? What's it like? 3 out of 4 marriages go right down the drain now?
Today we're going to talk about marriage being a scam. Did y'all know that? Did y'all know marriage is a scam?
Marriage doesn't work out very often if you just look at the statistics of it.
No one hates marriage more than married people. When you hear a lot of them talk about their marriages, you're like, my goodness, should we call 911?
In your opinion, what is the hardest part of marriage?
Being married.
Is an open marriage a healthy alternative for couples to consider?
They're difficult as it is.
That's the truth.
Why would you want to bring somebody else into a relationship?
Right.
No!
Why didn't you get married?
Because it's stupid. I mean, who's happy with it? Everyone gets divorced.
So many marriages end in divorce. Like, think about the vows that you say, till death do us part. How many people say that? So it's just like people's words mean nothing. People are so non-committal in today's day and age.
Those guys that get married early, they never achieve what they should have achieved, and it doesn't work because he never becomes the man he could have.
You know, the science is clear. Men just want more sex than women do, and that's why that is one of the conflicts that often come up in relationships.
70% of those divorce filings, and the number one source of that divorce filing is no longer a viable provider.
Wow.
People think it's values or infidelity. It's not. It's almost always related to money.
Only cause of divorce, as far as I can see, is disconnection. Disconnection from your partner. And people disconnect from their spouse or their partner the same way they go bankrupt. Very, very slowly, and then all at once.
Amen. If you got a Bible, go ahead and turn to Ephesians chapter 5. We'll be there in just a few moments. Before we get into that, if I haven't had the chance to meet you, I go by Aunt. I serve as the pastor here at Midtown. I was very glad that you chose to worship with us today and that you didn't let the rain keep you away this morning. Amen. Amen. If you are new, especially if this is your first time, on your way out, on your left-hand side, we have our Connect table, and we would love for you to fill out a Connect card. One of our host team members will be able to help you with that. If this is your first time, we'd love to just be able to acknowledge that you're here with us today and be able to welcome you further if you would fill that out for us. We are continuing on in our sermon series called His and Hers. Again, called His and Hers. We've been looking into the biblical design that God gave to men and women. The first 2 sermons were specifically about men and women in general. And then we've moved forward specifically to focus on how that plays out in the marriage relationship. And just to recap a little bit, we talked about how husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, to nourish and cherish them and exercise their headship in that way. We talked about how wives are called to respect their husbands. Today, we'll focus more specifically on the husband's role and what God calls husbands to do. One of the things that we said is the headship that God has given to husbands is specifically for the nourishing and the cherishing of his wife. That's why he has this headship role. So that it allows the husband to more thoroughly love and care for his wife. We talked about this last week. Today's focus, this is why I kind of view today's sermon as a bit of an extension of last week's sermon. So last week we focused more big picture. What does God call husbands to? What does God call wives to? Today I want to get very practical. I want to give practical examples, concrete examples for husbands for what it might look like for you if you are a husband or if you are a man and desire to be a husband one day, what it would look like for you to nourish and cherish your wife in the way that God has called you to. So I'll draw from experiences from my life in marriage. I'll draw from thoughts and preferences that I've gotten from wives through years of marriage counseling here in our church. And also just some preferences that I've got from wives recently. I know I was able to send out a form to some of the wives in our church, and I would be drawing from some of the feedback we got in that form as well. But what I want to do first, before I get into the practicals, is to give a bit of a warning to husbands and any man who aspires to be a husband one day. And here's why I want to give you this warning. Or here's the warning I want to give you. I know husbands who are good at studying theology, but bad at nourishing and cherishing their wives. I know husbands that are good at quoting scripture, but are bad at nourishing and cherishing their wives. I know husbands who are good at serving in the church, but are not good at serving in their home through nourishing and cherishing their wives. I know husbands who are good at serving people outside of their home, but are bad at serving in their home. I know husbands who are seen by many as mature and faithful believers, but are not good at nourishing and cherishing their wife. I know pastors, ministers, and leaders in the church that are not good at nourishing and cherishing their own wife at home. Husbands, as you consider your own spiritual maturity, your own spiritual vitality, where you are in your walk with the Lord, if you are not considering how you're doing at loving your wife and nourishing and cherishing your wife, you are missing a critical factor to your own maturity as a follower of God. How you love your wife is a part of your maturity as a follower of Jesus. Because of that, I want to share with you, and again, very practically in very concrete ways, how you might nourish and cherish your wife well. Wives, here's what I need for you to do throughout this sermon. If there's anything that I say that resonates with you, that you're like, yep, this is something that I agree with, this would help my husband to nourish and cherish me better, I need you to make some kind of a note, a mental note, write it down, whatever it might be. And husbands, I need you to be able to have a follow-up conversation after this sermon with your wife. Every man, every woman is different. So I'll give some examples that I've seen be fruitful in some marriages, some in my own marriage, but you need to be able to have conversation about what works for you all. Every person is different. Every relationship, every marriage is different. And again, as I've said throughout this sermon series, if some of this, especially if some of this seems confusing today, of some things that I say, and you haven't listened to previous sermons, make sure you go to midtown2notch.com/sermons. Again, midtown2notch.com/sermons. You can get yourself caught up because a lot of the content does build on the previous content in the series. So for husbands, as we seek to nourish and cherish our wives, one of the questions that we want to be asking is, what can I do to help my wife thrive in her life and in our relationship? That is a critical question that should continuously be on the mind of the husband. What can I do to help my wife to thrive as an individual and in her relationship with me? So what I want to do to organize the sermon today is first talk about what does it look like for a husband to be proactive about nourishing and cherishing his wife, and then we'll get into what does it look like for a husband to be more reactive or more responsive in how he nourishes and cherishes his wife. By proactive, I just mean the husband's job to be looking at the big picture direction of the family and of the marriage and provide leadership that will help his family and specifically his wife to move towards health, move towards flourishing and thriving in her life. As a husband, this is something that you should always be proactive about. Headship isn't just about how we respond in a small, acute, temporary, short-term issue. It's about also having vision for where you want your family and your relationship to go. So what I want to do is I want to lay out 4 steps that I use fairly consistently to help me be proactive in nourishing and cherishing my wife, and then kind of give a lot of examples of what it looks like and how that might play out for you as well. So I'll outline the 4 steps. The first one is identify an area that could be healthier. Second is develop a plan and get feedback. Third, if you're a husband, I would recommend writing this down. Third, move forward for her benefit. And fourth is check in to see how it's going. Identify an area that could be healthier, develop a plan and get feedback specifically from her, move forward for her benefit, and then check in once you move forward to see how it's going. Husbands, I know a lot of us, here's why I want to get so practical today. A lot of us have not been trained in how to do this. A lot of us have not been trained. A lot of us don't have any examples. Some of us have very few examples, and we have not been taught very specifically and practically what does this look like on a day in, day out basis. So I want to try to help with that by getting as practical as I possibly can today. So I'll just show how this played out in a few different areas in my marriage. So with the first point being identify an area that could be healthier. One of the things that has took place that kind of has shaped how this has looked in my marriage is my wife has dealt with a number of health issues throughout our marriage, specifically some autoimmune disorders that have just caused her to really be lacking in energy in many, many, many different ways. And so one of the things that I was noticing was just that the workload in our home was a bit too heavy for what she was dealing with at the time. So as a husband, I'm identifying this is an issue. This is something as a husband that I need to step up and think about how can we move to a healthier place in this. So one of the things that I figured I could help out with was the load of cooking in the home. So I have 12 children. And when you have 12 children, I don't actually have 12. It feels like I have 12 children. When you have so many children, and when your children, people didn't talk to me about this, but at some point your children reach an age where they eat as much as you do at dinner. I wasn't prepared for this to take place as early as it did. But because of that, one of the big responsibilities that consistently occurs in our home is just how we're going to feed these 12 children that eat so much in my house. And so, okay, it's 4. That's fair. It's 4. But with that said, the load of it, well, I could see it taking a toll on how my wife was doing at the time. And so I started thinking through what might I do to be able to step in and help. And so I came to my wife with an idea. So this was me developing a plan to get feedback that I was going to get one of those Blackstone griddles that you can cook on them outside, has a lot of room on them. Part of the reason I wanted to do it was because I was like, okay, well, if we use that, then I can cook multiple things at one time for the meal. Thought it'd be helpful. Thought I could also get my kids to help out because, if you're training a kid how to cook and you're inside, the motor skills sometimes might cause them to make a mess all over the place. But if you're outside and make a mess, nobody really cares and it's fine. So my point is, that was a plan that I came up with, brought it to my wife and just asked her, what do you think? Do you think this is something that would be more beneficial for you? I think it'd allow me to take more of the cooking load. We can get the kids outside with me so the house isn't loud and hectic from all 12 of their voices. And I brought it to her. She felt like it was a pretty good plan. So then I took the lead and just like executing the plan, purchasing it, putting it together, and really starting to change the way the cooking process worked in our home, including helping our children learn to cook, because I just felt like that would make things a lot easier for us as a family, for everyone shared the load, and particularly easier on my wife. Then I just check in with her periodically just to see how it's going. That's one thing I highly recommend to husbands. If you're leading out in the decision, never try to, when you can, not make it a decision that seems like, hence now forevermore, this is what we're going to do. But instead, this is something I wanted to try. Let's see how it goes. Let's get feedback. Let's see if we can make it better, tweak things if we need to. And so since then, we have tweaked it in a number of ways. I've kind of told her I wanted to cut all the complex meals out that we do. Like some of the meals, just like let's find meals that are simple, that we can get through pretty easily, that the kids can help with, just to kind of decrease the workload and the demand that was there during that time. And so currently, the way it's currently going is I do most of the cooking in the home, but it's almost like a systemic change that we needed to make in our home that would help my wife to flourish even more. On the note of like me doing most of the cooking, if I'm going to quick side note for the husbands here, I'll say it this way. Specifically for the husbands, if your wife is working as much as you do to provide, it makes absolutely no sense for her to be working more than you in the home. If she is working to provide as much as you are, and she's expending herself as much as you are, biologically, it just makes no sense for her to be doing more work than you, particularly if she's weighed down with stress and overwhelmed in the way that my wife was. Your body was made with more energy. There's a reason, in general, men need to consume more calories than women. Because God created men's bodies to be able to output more energy, more effort, more strain in physical work. For me, coming to realize that caused me to believe, okay, then as a man, I need to be prepared to do whatever I need to do to be able to do as much of the heavy lifting, as far as all the tasks and responsibilities that we have, as much of the heavy lifting as is necessary to help my wife flourish as much as possible. Man, here's what that means for you. You got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself. God has given you a body that is designed to work. The testosterone that you have is a game changer for you and your body, and the energy that you have and the muscle you're able to develop and all that. You need to take care of yourself. I'm not saying run yourself into the ground. I'm saying take care of yourself such that you can maximize the physical body and energy and capability that your body has. It is a wonderful way, especially, again, if you're married and you notice your wife has stress, she's carrying a lot on her plate, carrying a lot on her mental load. Take care of yourself so that you can bring all of the energy that God created you to have to bear for the benefit of your family. If you don't take care of yourself and thus you're sluggish, and thus you don't have adequate amounts of energy, and thus you're disengaged. You're not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's going to greatly hinder your ability to contribute to the well-being of your family, to the nourishing and cherishing of your wife in the way that God has called you to. He has given you the position as the head to use what he has blessed you with for the good of your wife, for the good of your family. Take care of yourself. You need to be as well as you can be. Because outside of having some form of physical ailment, you should be able to produce more and be more productive as a man because of the amount of energy that God has given to you. And as a husband, I want you to own that. And I want you to hold yourself to that kind of a standard. I want you to hold yourself to that kind of an expectation in your home to be who God created you to be as a man. That was the first example. Just we changed some of how we did things with cooking in our home. There was another thing, some visits to the doctor, and the doctor told my wife that she needs to be consistent with exercise in a few different things, and she was trying to balance that, but also use time in the mornings to be able to spend time in the Word as well. And she's a teacher, and so she was like, "I'm gonna have to get up at like 5 a.m. if I'm gonna do this." And I don't know. She was like, "I don't know if I can do that consistently or as consistently as need be on my own." So then I had to make a business decision because I knew what that meant. Because there was only one other person who had the potential of being up at 5 a.m. so that she's not doing it by herself. And I'm not a morning person, not a morning person. But in that moment, I realized what she's saying is she would be healthier if I joined her in this, that she would be more well if I joined her in this. So we started setting an alarm at 4:45 because I know I'm not going to get up till 5 o'clock if the alarm set at 4:45. So I started setting an alarm at 4:45 so I would be up at 5 o'clock. And it was one of the best decisions I think that both of us have made. It led to both of us being more, I would say more consistent in spending time in the Word, more consistent in exercising. For me, more consistent in spending time in the Word in ways that weren't just me preparing for a sermon, if that makes sense. More consistent in time for the Word that was just for me. Being up at 5 o'clock in the morning, we got in a rhythm together of spending time in God's Word and exercising in the mornings in a way that was just beneficial for both of us. I honestly thought I was doing it primarily for her, and it ended up benefiting me greatly. When we moved forward with the decision, I had to change my bedtime and my nighttime routine, and it resulted, again, in so much consistency for the both of us. Husbands, I sent out a survey last week to wives in our church who are members of our church. 75% of the wives that responded said in one way or another that they desire for their husband to provide more spiritual leadership in the home. 75%, 3 out of 4. They mentioned things like making sure we're reading scripture and praying together without the kids daily and having a regular time of communication about our marriage. They mentioned one wife mentioned making sure that she gets time in the Word, and then him telling her about what he's learning about and how they might be able to apply it to a situation was a way she said she desired for her husband to lead more and lead better in the home. One wife said, "I desire more intentional spiritual leadership in our marriage and family life." Things like praying together more regularly, reading scripture with our kids, talking about God more as a normal part of our rhythm. This was something that surprised me the more and more I talked to wives about this one. It surprised me how consistently wives in our church throughout the years have said, "I desire for my husband to lead more in this. I desire for my husband to be the one that holds the line and makes sure that we spend time in the Word." I talked to one wife, it was last year, and she was saying, "Sometimes I want my husband to be like, no, we're not watching Netflix tonight. We're going to spend time reading scripture because we haven't done that today." And I think oftentimes as husbands, we don't realize that, or maybe it's communicated, but for whatever reason, we don't step into it oftentimes the way God calls us to, the way our wives desire for us to do so. I know every wife is different. I'm not saying every wife is saying that, but I'm saying 75% of the wives who filled out the form, the survey that I sent out just last week, stated that as a desire that they have for their husbands. To develop a plan, execute a plan and strategies to cultivate spiritual health in our homes. Husband, if you're a member of our church and you have no idea where to start with this, find me. I'd love to meet with you. I would legitimately enjoy and love to meet with you to talk about what it might look like for you to take steps in that direction for your family. So that's for how can we proactively be about the work of nourishing and cherishing our wives. I want to switch a little bit and talk about how we might be more reactive or maybe responsive to nourishing and cherishing our wives as well. Because it's important that we see big picture, but it's also important that we know how in the moment, on a Tuesday, based on what's going on, that we know as husbands how to respond well to our wives. One of the things I hear from wives quite a bit, fairly often I would say, is when they bring something that's emotional in nature to their husband. The thing I consistently hear is the husband tries to find a solution to the thing that caused the emotional problem. The wife says, stop trying to fix stuff. I just want you to listen. The husband says, I am listening. That's why I'm saying what I think we should do to fix it. But what's happened is she has shared something that is emotionally vulnerable for her and brought that to him because she's desiring connection. He's trying to fix the situation, leaving her feeling rejected and dismissed. She's frustrated with him, and now he feels unappreciated for trying to help. And both of them are making this mistake because they don't understand the design differences between men and women. Let me explain. Research would say that generally speaking, when it comes to dealing with stress and coping with stress, women tend to do that via what they call the tend and befriend response. Tend and befriend means through social connection, I deal with stress. My stress levels, my cortisol decreases through social connection. So oftentimes the wife is coming to the husband, wants sharing emotions for social connection because that is how she is wired to be able to deal with stress and cope with stress well. And the husband, he has more testosterone, which is a hormone that leads to taking action. It's a very action-oriented hormone. Men tend to de-stress, research would suggest, more so through problem solving and action. So she's trying to connect emotionally, which decreases her stress. He's trying to respond with action and problem solving, which decreases his stress, and there's a disconnect between the two. And husbands, what I want to try to communicate to you is how I try to navigate this, hopefully in a practical way that's helpful for you. Here's what I try to do. I don't try to stop problem solving because I do love to problem solve. I just reorient what I understand the problem to actually be, to help me to be more helpful to my wife in this situation. If you're a wife and you're here and you're in the room, would love for you to pay careful attention to this section so you two can have a good conversation about what's most helpful for you in these kind of scenarios and situations. For me, I tend to look at strong emotions as a storm. Like that picture just kind of helps me to think through it really well. I kind of look at it as a storm. So if I see my wife in a storm where there's strong emotions, there's high levels of stress, or whatever it might be, I don't come in and try to talk her out of experiencing the storm, which I used to do. I don't try to tell her how to avoid the storm next time. That's not the problem at hand. The problem at hand is there's a storm now, and the biggest issue and the biggest problem is when she feels alone in that storm. No one wants to be in a storm by themselves. She didn't marry you to feel alone. She didn't marry you to feel disconnected from you. She married you for relationship and closeness and oneness with you. So what I try to do as a husband, I ask myself, okay, what does it look like for me to connect with my wife in this time, in this storm, to let her know that she's not alone? Husbands, if you got pencil and paper, I recommend you writing this part down. It often looks like me validating the emotional experience as much as I can. I can understand why that would be hard. Yeah, that seems really tough. Gosh, I know that's a difficult thing. I'm sorry that happened to you. Making eye contact. I'm sorry I'm having to be so elementary with this. Making eye contact, validating emotional experiences, and just being present in the storm, oftentimes, for the vast majority of wives that I have talked to, is the most helpful thing that you can do and the best problem solving that you can possibly do at that time. For me personally, I don't even offer alternate perspectives, alternate ways or differing ways of doing things until the storm has died down, unless we're up against some type of deadline and we got to make a decision. Outside of that scenario, I just try to connect until I can feel the storm has died down. Then we can talk about different ways of viewing or things that can be helpful. Husbands, another thing that you can do very practically is just ask the question if you're unsure. Are you more wanting me to just hear you out on this? And just be a listening ear and a shoulder for you, or are you looking for thoughts or whatever it might be? Because oftentimes the husbands I talk to, I've heard husbands say things like this, which shows me it's like, you don't understand. I've heard husbands say things like this. Well, I don't know why she would even bring it to me if she didn't want a solution. And it's like, you're loving your wife almost like she's a man. I was on Instagram one time, heard a quote from a Christian woman that basically changed my life and my marriage. She said, husbands, stop loving your wives like they're men, love them like they're women. And so understand how she is designed differently from you. And if you're at a place where you're saying, I don't even know why you would bring this to me if you didn't want a solution, you're missing the fact of so much of what I said in week 2 of this sermon series about how God created women with an emphasis on relationship and connection and closeness. And as a husband, this is something that you need to be aware of. You need to be cognizant of. You need to be prepared to respond to in a helpful way. I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting with a couple and the husband is absolutely blind to the fact that what the wife is looking for most is to be cherished and feel close in the moments. And I struggle to get him to see it. I struggle to get him to understand because it's not how he thinks. It's not how he interacts with the world. It's almost a foreign concept for him. I want to encourage all the husbands in our church to get good at empathizing with our wives and trying to understand what is going on in the difficult times. Another challenge that I wanted to bring up that I think we have as husbands oftentimes in being the head is we have the responsibility of leading our families in the right direction, regardless of whether or not we feel like doing what's right, regardless of whether or not she feels like doing what's right, whether or not the kids feel like doing what's right. We have the responsibility of leading our families toward what God would have us for. We're human, our wives are human. Sometimes neither one of us feel like making the decision that would be honoring to God or that would be the most healthy thing at the time. But as husbands, we are charged with holding the line to lead our families to do what's most honoring to God. And one of the ways, another way of nourishing and cherishing our wives is knowing how to allow the love and compassion that we have to take the shape and form of assertive, decisive leadership. Allowing our love and our compassion and our desire to nourish and cherish our wives to take the form of assertive and decisive leadership. I've asked a number of wives this question. I've asked the question, if your husband sees you doing something that he is convinced is very unhealthy for you, it is bad, he's convinced this is a bad thing for you to do for yourself, do you want him to tell you or not? And every single time, that's the answer that I've got. Every single time. Yes, I want him to tell me if he is convinced that this is a bad thing for me. And I ask, what if it's not something that you want to hear, not something that you want to do? And essentially, if I can paraphrase, the answer I got is, I've gotten from a number of wives, is I desire to be with a man that is both courageous enough and also has a level of self-control within himself that he can say what needs to be said, remaining grounded, remaining in control of himself without being defensive or combative. That he would be courage, that he will have the necessary amount of courage and composure to be honest without being combative or defensive. I was talking to actually a couple sisters that aren't married but desire to be married. At some point, I asked them the same question, and they were like, "Oh no, I need a man that can tell me no if he needs to tell me no. That can be honest with me if there's a bad decision that is being made, that will speak up and be honest." One sister even said, "I wouldn't want to be with a man that I feel like I could push over easily." I think one of the reasons this is difficult for us as men is many of us, if we're honest, are afraid of being toxic or being seen as practicing toxic masculinity. We're afraid that if we're assertive, ultimately for the good of our wives, we'll be seen as being overly harsh or as an authoritarian dictator. So some of us are so afraid of being overly harsh that we've lost connection with our ability to be decisive and assertive and remain solid in a way that actually bring a lot of blessing to our families. Some of us are afraid of being labeled as toxic. Some of us, husbands, we got to be honest with ourselves. Some of us are afraid of our wife's emotions. I've seen it time and time and time again. Some of us don't say things that we truly believe need to be said because we're so uncomfortable with what our wife's emotional response might be if she's upset. So in an effort to not cause any issues, because we don't want that smoke, we cower. It's like we're the head that's afraid of our own body, which causes this disjointedness and ends up having an overall negative impact on the relationship, on our homes, on our families. And I'm specifically talking about situations where for the husband to honestly represent his views, he could just say something like, hey, babe, I thought about this, I prayed about this, and I'm convinced it's going to go really bad if we do that. Or, babe, that's wrong to do. You really should not do that. Or, babe, in our marriage, we don't talk to each other this way. We need to keep all of our communication respectful with each other. Now, husband, you got to remain respectful all the time as well if you're going to do that, if you're going to say that. But husband, don't fail to lead in a way that honestly represents your convictions and your shared values as a couple because you're afraid to be around her when she's upset. Now, I didn't say, when I'm talking about afraid to be around her when she's upset, I'm not saying that either of you should ever be disrespectful to each other or anything like that. Maybe here's my point. Sometimes nourishing and cherishing errs on the side of being more gentle and softer and understanding and more tender. And sometimes nourishing and cherishing looks like your compassion takes the form of assertive and decisive leadership. And the wise husband, the mature husband, knows his wife well enough to know how to discern between the two, to know how to discern between what is best for the given situation that they find themselves in. The wise husband is growing and being so attuned to his wife and her needs that he learns what his wife needs and he responds in a way that's most beneficial for her in the moment. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a wife. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, a wife in our church. And she was describing, I was just asking about marriage. Even honestly, we've been preparing for this sermon series ever since probably over a year ago at this point. And I was talking to her about her marriage and how it was going and asked her about examples of her husband leading in a way that's helpful in their marriage. And she said quickly, she was like, there was a time where she had an appointment with the doctor and the doctor was like, basically she got a diagnosis and the doctor was like, you need to change A, B, C, and D. These are the things that need to change in order for you to be well. She said they got home and the husband was like, all right, doctor said we need to change. So we're not buying this kind of food anymore. We're not going to do that. Also, I know you need to get up at a certain time to work out. You're not going to do it alone. I'm getting up. I'm working out with you. We're going to do this together. We're going to get you healthy. Decisive, assertive leadership. You know what she said? She said, I've never felt more loved, more seen, more cherished, and more valued in their relationship than that. Than him saying, I'm going to take this level of responsibility because of how much I care about you. This is the level of responsibility that I'm going to take for your well-being, and this is what needs to happen, so this is what we are going to do. Sometimes love and compassion and nourishing and cherishing looks like confident, decisive, assertive leadership that communicates just how much love you have. That's what true love often looks like. That's what true headship often looks like. Let me try to give my last practical example for today. Husbands, this one may apply to you if your wife is a mom, specifically with young children. And I'd love for you to ask her about this to get her experience and her realness. A number of the moms that I've talked to in preparation for this series have shared with me something that seems to be a somewhat common experience of when there's a lot of young children with a lot of needs. Sometimes moms I've talked to feel a level of guilt around not being able to do more for the children, not be able to do more in the home, not be able to do more sometimes for the husband as well. There's just sometimes this very heavy guilt that a lot of moms feel. And because of that, a lot of moms find it difficult to take care of themselves, get the rest that they need because they feel guilty about not doing more for the children, more for the family, more for the home, and that kind of thing. And so the experience that I've had described to me a number of times is one of I'm either feeling unhealthy, unrested, like I'm not getting a healthy amount of rest, I'm not taking care of myself, or I'm feeling very guilty about not doing more and not always being able to do more for the children, for the family, and for the home. So I've had probably about 4 moms, I think, share this with me. And I asked them all the same question. I said, which would you prefer in that moment? In a moment where you're overwhelmed, you got so much going on and you want to be able to do more and you're feeling guilty about not doing more, which would you prefer from your husband? Would you prefer your husband come to you and say, hey, would you like to take a break? Do you need a break? Or would you prefer your husband come in and say, hey, you need to take a break? You go take a break, relax, rest. I got it. I'm going to handle dinner. I'm going to handle the kids, and I'll make sure everything is good. Now we're at 5 out of 5. If we were at 4 out of 4, now we're at 5 out of 5. Every wife that I've talked to chose the option, which I would label as this confident, decisive, loving, assertive leadership that communicates, I see you, I care about you, I want good for you. This is what we're going to do now because it is what is good for you. And I've talked to so many husbands who struggle with being assertive in a way that's beneficial, and marriages are suffering because of it. Because God designed you husbands in the room. If you're a man and you're desiring to be a husband in the future, he desired you to be the head in such a way where you practice and exercise confident, decisive, loving leadership. He wants your love and your compassion to take the form of this assertiveness that cares for and loves and nourishes and cherishes your wife. I know that's not the case for every wife or every mom or anything like that, but conversations like these are beneficial for married couples to have, oftentimes so the husband can grow in being a leader, so the husband can be reassured that this is actually the kind of leadership that the wife desires from him. A lot of husbands that I've talked to, honestly, are just unsure of it. A lot of husbands fall into this place of like, well, I tried to step in and lead at this point, and it seemed like it didn't go well, and she made sure I knew that. And then I tried to step up and lead in another time, and that didn't go well, and she made sure I knew that as well. So then the husband just steps back and goes into a mode of, okay, well, then you just let me know what you want me to do. You just let me know what you want me to do. Right? Men are designed, if you go back again to the first and second sermons of the series, men are designed with an emphasis on work and productivity and usefulness. Adam was created and placed in the garden to work and keep it before he ever had a relationship, right? Eve was never created Eve never lived outside of the context of a relationship. That's a distinction that Adam had that men still carry to this day. So when the man is feeling like I've tried, I've done everything I can do, nothing is good enough, he often shrinks back. So what I'm asking you as a married couple to do is to have a conversation about what it can look like, and for the wife to share, what do you desire for it to look like for the husband to lead well in the home? Hopefully in a way that affirms him and encourages him, because I've talked to a lot of husbands who have a lot of difficulty stepping forward into what God calls us to. One more thing I want to share I think to help us as husbands have a good perspective on what we're actually aiming for as the heads of our home. A few weeks ago, my wife said something to me. It was the most encouraging thing she's ever said to me. Been married for 15 years. This is the most encouraging thing she has ever said to me. We were talking about just our relationship and me growing as a leader in our relationship. She said, yeah, I trust you because you have led me to good time and time again. She said, I trust you because you have led me to good time and time again. In a follow-up conversation about it, she said, you always did it in a way that was tender and loving. At no point did it feel controlling, domineering, or harsh. And I don't say that to brag on myself. I say that to give us as husbands maybe a clearer picture of what we're actually aiming for. What you're aiming for as a husband is not simply, we got through the day without a fight. What you're aiming for as a husband is not simply, yeah, we seem to be doing okay in the relationship. What you're aiming for as a husband is that you use the headship that God has given you time and time again for the good of your wife, where she feels nourished and she feels cherished and taken care of by you, to the point that it builds and cultivates trust within the marriage. That is what you are aiming for. That is what your headship should be used for. That is what we should be moving towards. Your love is to reflect the love that Christ has for the church. His love is faithful. His love is consistent. He is trustworthy. We follow him and we have faith in him because he has proven himself to be trustworthy to us. He came, he showed us how to live. He displayed his love for us and his death for us. He gave himself up for us for our good. So we see that and we know he is good. He is worthy of trusting. His leadership is worthy of being trusted in our lives. And for husbands, for us to have our marriages be the way that God designed for them to be, then we are to follow that same example and be trustworthy men of God that God uses for his purposes, for his love to be put on display within our marriages. Husbands, that is our aim. I gave a lot of examples today. Ask your wife what resonated with her. Take into consideration everything that she says, that you might continue to grow as a man that loves the way that Christ does and the way that you nourish and cherish your wife. Family, y'all pray with me.